I don't know if you've noticed, but in some of the stories of Jesus, sometimes he seems a little irreverent. Have you noticed? He asks questions that I'm not sure that I would actually ask someone. He goes to the pool of Bethesda on the Sabbath, and there are people there who have what probably today we would think to be disabilities, illnesses, sicknesses, and they're all there waiting for the angel to come and to stir the water and to be the first into the water and then to be healed. And so Jesus goes for a visit and he sees a man there and he says, "Do you want to be well?" Now, I don't know how I would feel if I went down to my doctor and my doctor said to me, "Do you want to be well?" Like, we know that Jesus is fully human and fully God, but just for a moment, let's think about it. Do we think that that's an appropriate question? Yeah? Do you think it's a relationship building question? Do you think there's any possibility that some people would be offended by that question? Well, I'm just hearing this little sort of mumble amongst us. Am I making us just a little bit uncomfortable? My goal is not to call Jesus' character into disrepute, I promise, but to make us think about the techniques that Jesus used. Because let's think about it for a second. He goes to a place where this man has been going for 40 years. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at change. And my experience of life is that most of us are not. Now, so most of you would be aware that I have severe food intolerances. And so since I've been in Bega for 6 years, 5 years of my 6 years in Bega, there's been the Thai restaurant, down in Church Street there. And because my intolerances are quite severe, I went down to the Thai restaurant when that opened and said, "Could you please make me a Kylie special?" And it has these things in it. And now I go down and I say, "Kylie special pad Thai," and they say, "With salt?" And I say, "Yes," and out comes Kylie special order. Well, recently I decided that maybe it was time for a little bit of a change. And I tried to change the Kylie special. This was unacceptable to the people at the Thai restaurant. Now, don't get me wrong, they make really great food. They are really nice people. They've been kind to me for a period of time. But when I suggested putting cabbage in the Kylie special, it was quite a stressful moment for everybody. They went to the kitchen, they came back to the table on no less than 4 separate occasions. And so now if I go in and I say, "Can I have the Kylie special?" they go, "Oh, yes." If I say, "Can I have it with cabbage?" they go, "Oh." But you know what made me intrigued about it? If Kylie can't even change the Kylie special, it says something to humans about our ability to change. We don't like it. I don't like it when my brands change in the supermarket. I don't like it when I have to park my car in a different spot. As human beings, let's face it, we've all got our pulpits and pews, all things that have been in the same spot for a long time and that we like things a particular way. So when I read this story and Jesus comes to the pool of Bethesda and he turns to this man and he says, "Do you want to be well?" I'm like, hang on. Maybe Jesus understands human nature better than what we think. Because I would guess, and from my world, 4 days a week I work in disability services, I was like, this man's been going to day program for 40 years. He would have his spot. He would be annoyed if he arrived and someone else had put their mat in his spot. And you have to have your spot right because your spot's near your buddies. Would you agree? And so if somebody takes your spot, you might have to sit with somebody else's buddies. He also says later in the story that he has no one that comes with him. So could you imagine where his support network was if he'd been coming to the pool of Bethesda for 40 years? That group of people was his family. That was his safety, his security, his friends, his social and community participation. It was everything. And so when Jesus comes to him and says, do you want to be well? Jesus is almost asking, do you want my help? Do you want life to be different? Are you okay with life being different? And it's interesting when we look at this story that he says, I don't have anyone to help me get into the water. He's actually, for 40 years, been coming to the same place, but he's been trying. He's actually been trying for 40 years, the best he knows how, to get well. And in fact, he's come every day for 40 years. He could have said, you know what? After 39.5 years, I've been trying this long enough. I'll just stop. What's the use in going down to the pool of Bethesda? I never get in first anyway. Doesn't matter. And stop going. Yet Jesus recognises that this is a man who's given it his absolute best shot. And so he engages in him in a conversation that at first could be seen as provocative, but invites him into a conversation about his willingness for change and growth. Does he want things to be different? It's interesting that we also see this same pattern in the story of Jesus healing the blind man in Luke. Jesus is walking along the road and a man starts calling out, Jesus, have mercy on me. Jesus, have mercy on me. And again, Jesus engages in a question. What do you want from me? Hang on, the guy's blind. Surely it's obvious. Surely the answer is to make him see again. But Jesus doesn't go around healing in a willy-nilly kind of nature. He actually comes to people and engages in a process with them of offering hope and healing. Maybe it's actually his feet that are causing him the most problems. But Jesus asks him and he says, what do you want me to do for you? What is it that you're looking for? And Jesus begins this interaction without any assumptions. He's not assuming that because the guy is blind, that that's his greatest need. He's not creating any judgment in the conversation. He is asking the person what the God of the universe can do from him. When I look at it from that perspective, I think it's a beautiful question. That the God of the universe doesn't come to us with judgment. He doesn't come to us with his list of things saying, right, now let's get this sorted, Kylie. Too many biscuits this week. Do you want that to be healed, Kylie? Yes. Weren't so kind in that moment today, Kylie. What are we going to do about that? It's not that. It's a humble, honest, judgment-free approach to others. So then you go, right, hang on, your third question there. If you're saying to me that Jesus comes into these encounters judgment-free, then let's go to Matthew chapter 8, verse 26. So you know we've had the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus has said, don't worry about tomorrow because tomorrow is going to worry about itself. And I care for the lily of the valley, and how much do I more care for you? And after 3 days there on the mountain, he finally says to the disciples, right, in the boat, let's go. And they get onto the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus promptly, after big days of preaching and miracles, falls off to sleep, and the storm raises up. And of course, the disciples are frightened. Maybe they've got every reason to be frightened. They've lived on this sea their whole lives. They know what a bad storm looks like. They're looking around and seeing the lightning and the waves. They're looking and they're seeing the water coming up from the boat. Everything they can see and hear says to them that this is an unsafe situation to be in. Maybe some of them have lost friends to storms in the past. Maybe on previous occasions, they've actually been on the edge themselves in a terrible storm. And so when Jesus wakes up, he says, peace be still. And then he says this question, Why are you afraid? He asks them about where their faith is. And maybe he isn't inviting them into a challenge of what they should or shouldn't have done, but maybe he's creating an opportunity for learning and for growth, for faith and fear to be considered, that sometimes that we are in fear, but that our faith can be at the other end of the fear and it can tug of war together, that maybe that we can step forward in faith and acknowledge that there are hard things, but that God is good and that He is with us. When I look at these three questions, one of the things that I notice the most is Jesus' ability to tailor his approach to the needs of the people. Did Jesus not know what was going on at the pool of Bethesda? He did. But when he reached out to the person, he engaged them. He engaged them judgment-free, and he engages in a growth process. I think Jesus' methods are absolutely magic. It's absolutely special to be able to change the shape of what he's doing to reach out to others around him, to where they're at and to what they need. So over the last few times that I've shared with you guys, we've been talking about shape quite a lot. Do you remember? Yep. That each and every one of us has a shape, that God made us with spiritual gifts, with our heart, with our abilities, with our own unique personalities and our experiences that help us be the people that we are in the world, that we're all unique, fearfully and wonderfully made, and able to offer our shape to the world around us. We also talked in what I think was everybody's favourite sermon of mine so far, and everybody loved all the technical details of this sermon, when we talked about the shape of how we do church and how we do our organisations. Yep, I'm sensing the enthusiasm for these drawings here up on the screen. Very exciting, wasn't it? That maybe the shape, rather than a command shape, that it could actually be a team of teams with everybody working all together. That grace is the most magnificent equaler. That grace says that we are all broken and in need of the glory of God, and that we are equal, yet in different teams doing different work. So what about the shape of our community? What if we were able to take our personal shape and the shape of our church to take it to the next step? Now, I want to share with you this model. It's called natural church development. It's pretty old these days. But what this said was that healthy things grow all by themselves. But there are these 8 factors that we need for things to grow. So some of them fall into the idea of our shape of an individual. So passionate spirituality, gift-orientated ministry, and holistic small groups. Now, the thing that's really interesting about that is you can have ministry, but have you ever felt like a square peg in a round hole? Have you ever done a job that you just think, oh my goodness, this just feels like I'm grating sandpaper on sandpaper? Has anybody felt that before? Yep. There are things that you just go, this just isn't a good fit for me. So yeah, we can be doing ministry, but it needs to be based on being gift-orientated. We could acknowledge that everybody has spirituality, but is it alive and thriving and passionate? Do we actively want to reach out and to things that will grow our spiritual experience? Yes, we can be in small groups, but are they holistic? And so this natural church development says we've got a group of things that need to happen for individuals, and there's a group of things that need to happen for churches. Functional structures, empowering leadership, inspiring worship, and loving relationships. Which is really, really interesting because what comes with this natural church development thing is like a survey that churches can take, and you fill it out and you work out which one of these these factors on the board is your lowest factor, and if you can improve it, maybe you can grow your church. So they've done this across the church in Australia, and you'll never guess what the lowest factor is in the churches around Australia, in the Seventh-day Adventist churches around Australia. It's actually loving relationships. Yeah, we've got relationships, but are they loving? And what does that mean? What does it actually mean to be in loving relationships with other people? And the fourth thing, that the last section that Natural Church Development says that we need for churches to grow is the shape of our community, that we need need-orientated evangelism. Yes, we can have evangelism, but are we using Jesus' method? Are we actually tailoring our approach to what the person in front of us or the community around us actually needs? So I alluded to this a second ago, that what Natural Church Development says is it's kind of like a barrel. A church needs these 8 things happening, some of them for individuals, some of them for the way the church works, and some of them for the way the community works for a church to grow. And like with a barrel, your lowest factor, or the one that's not going the greatest, is where the water's going to pour out. And so what it says is if you can raise your lowest factor, then you can grow your church, which is a really interesting and fantastic model. And so today, I don't know what our lowest factor is, but as we've been working through the different shapes, I just want to ask us this question. Are we aware of our community's shape? Are we understanding of the Bega Valley? And as we reach out to them, are we reaching out in a need-orientated approach? Because it seems that lots of energy goes into our spiritual shape and the shape of our church. And are we putting yet the same amount of energy into the shape of our community and supporting our community? So I just did a bit of research. I did a little bit of Googling to look at actually what the shape of the Bega Valley is. So let's have a little wander through the statistics of the Bega Valley. So what we know is there's 34,012 people who live across this region in the 2016 census. That only 11.6% of those people were born overseas, and the biggest chunk of those who were born overseas were born in England. Now, this is not shock horror. What are the industries for the Bega Valley? Agriculture, fisheries and forestry. And tourism, that's not a big shock to us either. Some of us don't particularly like the tourism sometimes because, let's face it, you can't get a car park in Tathra during January. But it is actually one of the top 4 industries in the Bega Valley. But here's another interesting statistic. 96.6% of the businesses in this shire have less than 20 employees, which is really interesting. So the people who are making business run in this region are small business owners. So that means they've got less than 20 employees, so that means they're doing their own accounting, they're serving at the front desk, they're sweeping their own hall, they're working long hours, they're doing a lot of stuff. Anyone who's run a small business knows that you can't kind of fob jobs off to someone else, you've got to do it yourself. And it's pressure. And it's hard, and it's a lot of work. So that 96% of the business owners in this valley would be under that kind of pressure. And we have an average level of social disadvantage, or a bit lower than average. So I'm like, what does that mean? So they've got this measure right, and the highest level of the least amount of social disadvantage, maybe I should let you guess, where would the suburbs in New South Wales or in Australia be that have the least level of social disadvantage? Yes! So the northern suburbs of Sydney. Sorry? I didn't quite dig into that, but the 2 biggest ones are the northern suburbs of Sydney. So Sydney has, and there's some spots in Sydney that have quite low disadvantage as well, but there's big pockets in Sydney that have high level of social advantage. And the next one is Peppermint Grove in Western Australia. Has anybody been to Peppermint Grove in Perth? Yeah. It's where the University of Western Australia is. I didn't attend that university. That was for the prestigious amongst us. I went to Curtin University, where all the working class girls went. So Bega, when you rate social disadvantage, Bega is just below the middle. So we're not the worst of disadvantage, but we're nowhere near the best either. And what's interesting is that we have a lower proportion in the younger age group of 0 to 17 and a higher in the higher group of 65 plus. So a large percentage of empty nesters and retirees. So you see there, we've got 18.2% of the population who are empty nesters and retirees compared to 13.1% of other rural communities within New South Wales. So we're not kind of comparing that to Sydney, we're actually comparing it to what it might look like in another rural location. So you can say, oh, surely Sydney would have more than us. Yes, surely Sydney wouldn't have more than us, but other little towns actually have less than us of retirees. So what does that say to us about the Bega Valley? A larger percentage of older workers and pre-retirees. So 16.7% of the Bega Valley population is in that, let's say, 50 plus age group. Let's just say it, right? Let's just say it. People who are heading towards the end of their working life and heading into retirement, compared to another rural town that will only have 13.8%. So a larger percentage of seniors, again 14% compared to 11.4%, and a smaller percentage of the younger workforce. So 7.5% of our population is young people, where 11% of another rural town would be young people as well. So that's a really interesting thing. When you look at the trends of the Bega Valley, the people that are moving in are pre-retirees and retirees, and the people that are moving out are young people. So what does that mean in terms of the household types? So it means, you can see there that the red one is the Bega Valley Shire and the grey one is other regional New South Wales communities. So couples with children are significantly less than couples without children. So you can see it's kind of the wrong way around. So you would often think of families being thriving with lots of kids and communities and those sorts of things, and the Bega Valley is the other way. The other thing that we notice is that we have less single parents than most regional towns. I found that really interesting, because that would be my first, how do we serve this community? Well, let's find the single parents, but we actually have less of them. And in fact, what we have is, on average, less people living in group households, and we have lots of people living alone, more than other regional centres. Now, I'm not going to try and interpret these statistics and say, what does that mean, or what we should do about it, but what it does factually tell us is that there are more people who don't have company at dinner time than the average town in our region. So also interesting to look at employment status of people in our region as well. And yes, we have a good percentage of people who are employed, more than other rural towns, but what's interesting is then we have less people employed full-time than other rural towns and a greater percentage of people working part-time than other rural towns. So what I understand for these statistics is what I hear from job service agencies is that people in Bega don't tend to be unemployed, they tend to be underemployed. So then you end up with a part-time position or several part-time positions, which then creates this interesting statistic about people's income in the Bega Valley. Analysis of individual income levels in the Bega Valley Shire in 2016 compared to other rural towns show a lower proportion of people earning a high income. So that's more than $1,750 per week, and a higher proportion of low-income people. So that means those earning less than $500 a week. So when we look at our town and we know that the average rental is $275 a week, and that we have a significant proportion of our community who are earning less than $500 a week, there's not a lot left after you take out your rent. So overall, 5.4% of the population earned a high income and 42.3% earned a low income. So that really means nearly every second person we see at Coles in the Bega Valley is earning under $500 a week. That's a lot. And just think for a minute how you'd make it work on under $500 a week. Which leads me to one of Jesus' questions. When we look at some of the struggles that these statistics might show that some people are having in the Bega Valley, are we making a difference? Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." We each have a shape individually, we have a shape as a church, and our community has a shape. And I guess I'm not in any way trying to challenge us today. I'm just trying to help us to get thinking about our shape. Are we, as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, are we making a difference? Is our church a healthy church so that we're all working on our own individual shape, that we work on our shape as a church for this one amazing and fantastic goal, that we may actually be the light on the hill to make a difference for those people who live alone here in the Bega Valley, for those people who don't earn enough income here in the Bega Valley, for whatever needs it is that we can see as the shape of our community. Are we working on our own shape? Are we getting as healthy as we possibly can be? Or are we getting a little bit out of shape? Is our shape getting a little bit round in places? Are we finding it difficult to walk in some places? Like I said, I'm not trying to be challenging. I'm just trying to get us thinking. As I get thinking about my shape and what contribution I can make, all of us can think about our own individual shape, but we kind of then zoom out, we take a step out. It starts with me, and then a step out to our church, and then we zoom out again and a step out to our community. And how can we have all of those things be working by their shape? You know, are we making a difference? This photo was taken in Christchurch on Thursday. You might not know that the man on the end there is Pastor Eddie Tupai. He's the New Zealand Pacific Union Conference president. And the dude over with the sunglasses on his head is Mike Sakuri. He's the lead pastor of the South New Zealand Conference. And then, I don't know his name, but the two dudes in the end there are pastors in the South New Zealand Conference. In terrible things that happened in our world last Friday, with people taking the opportunity to harm others when they came to worship and were in prayer, are we as a church making a difference in the community? An unnatural disaster. But there was representatives of the Seventh-day Adventist Church at the funeral of Muslim people whose lives were taken as an act of terror. And they were there standing united with their brothers and sisters who believe something that we don't necessarily believe, but they are human beings, and we're called to love and connect and to stand together and support each other. This last week was also the anniversary of another disaster, this time not an unnatural one, but a natural disaster, where here in the Bega Valley, people lost their homes and were having to be outside of their homes for a whole week. And 14 people from this church, from Jindabyne and from Maruya all worked together to support people who had nowhere to stay while they were waiting to hear whether their homes had been lost in a natural disaster. So today, I don't have any answers. I just have questions for us. And I hope that I'm in good company because it seems that Jesus used them so well. And the question that I want to challenge us with and think about today is, where do we need to get into shape? As we've walked through these different topics over the past few months, where is some change to our shape needed? For some of us, we might think, hey, I need to work for me to find some of that passion. That the passion has been caught under a whole bunch of difficulty and I need to find it again. Maybe there are some things in our church that we might want to think about whether we've got structures, but are they functional? We've got leadership, but is it empowering? We've got relationships, but is it loving? And as we be a light in this place, in this time where we see unnatural disasters, we see natural disasters, and we just see people who might need more love than they're getting, are we reaching out to the community and the shape that it is? So there's my question for you today, and I encourage us today to have a think about where we might want to get in shape.